Buenas a todos y bienvenidos a Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, el que ahora sí será seguramente el último episodio. He hecho un lío a la hora de poner el número de episodios. Espero que no haya salido algún episodio por delante o por detrás o nada de eso, ¿eh? Seguramente los números que digo estén mal, ¿vale? Pero, oye, peores cosas podrían pasar. Vamos ahí. Vamos a ir back. Estoy grabando el tirón porque quiero terminar este juego. Estoy con la motivación de terminarlo. Y me está llevando más tiempo de lo que me esperaba, la verdad. Sorry, Edgeworth. I didn't mean to get you in trouble. Don't worry about it. This is my problem, not yours. Hope I'm not interrupting anything, pals. Oh, guess I am. Siempre igual. I'll come back later. Wait, Detective Kamshu. What is it? You've got a lot of nerve, pal, making a detective run all around while on duty. And to top it off, you call me here. I've seen happier people at funerals. ¿Siempre dice lo mismo o qué? I take it Lana's having you run errands again. Let me tell you, this is the last time, pal. Here, she asked me to give you this. Evidence law. ¿Cómo? Give you this if there was a break in today's trial. Evidence law? Edgeworth was talking about this just the other day. You must know the two rules of evidence law. Rule number 1. No evidence shall be shown without the approval of the police department. Is that right, Mr. Wright? It seems so. You could at least study some evidence law, really. The chief prosecutor also wanted me to give you a message. A message? She said if you're planning to take him on, you're going to need this book. Him? I guess I'll need to give this book a thorough read. From Mrs. Sky explained the two rules of evidence law. Doesn't look like that book will do you any good now, though. All that's left now is the chief prosecutor's sentence. And that's where you're wrong, detective. Huh? Haven't you figured it out yet? Why I'm still sitting in that prosecutor's seat, despite all these allegations being thrown at me? Mr. Edgeworth, the real trial today hasn't begun yet. What? What else is there left to do? Your credibility has been all but ruined with this forged evidence you were unaware of. Emma Sky found out she unwillingly caused the man's death, and now you're telling me you want to do more? You've got to be kidding me, pal. You're missing the point, detective. Lana didn't murder Detective Goodman. What? She merely stuck a knife into his dead body. That means the real killer is still out there. What? And we're going to expose him, no matter what it takes. This case has hurt too many people. It's time to bring it to an end. February 25th, 1552, District Court, Courtroom number 9. Vamos ahí. Court will now reconvene for the trial of Miss Lana Sky. Mr. Edgeworth? Yes, Your Honor? The inquiry committee is planning to impose harsh penalties for your actions. Thank you for the news, Your Honor. Yes, well, normally this is where the prosecutor calls forth a witness. But, isn't easy to say. You see, there is some concern that you, Mr. Edgeworth, may have struck a bargain. You think I may have manipulated the witnesses? I didn't say that. It's just, you see, everyone has been talking and... Very well, Your Honor. I have a solution. A solution? That being the case, the prosecution will allow the defense to call forth all further witnesses. What? But there's no precedent for what you're proposing. Undeniably, this is an unusual arrangement, but a very effective one. If you would, it would prove that I haven't struck any deals with the witnesses. Well, Mr. Wright, what do you say? Unbelievable. Edgeworth has found a way to continue the trial. Very well. The defense accepts the prosecution's proposal. Then it's settled. The defense may now call forth the next witness. Mr. Wright? You do realize this is your last chance. If you call the wrong witness, this trial is as good as over. Time's finally come to bring out the real murderer. Este de aquí, tío. No. Damon Gant. The defense calls Damon Gant to the stand. Damon Gant? What does he have to do with anything? As the defendant's partner 2 years ago. Mr. Gant has first-hand knowledge of the crime. I feel we should hear what he has to say about it. As luck would have it, he should still be in the courthouse. He would also be the least likely to have been manipulated by me in any way. Wouldn't you agree, Your Honor? True. All right, bailiff, please escort Mr. Gant to the stand. Oh. Witness, please state your name and occupation. What is this, some kind of practical joke? I was just on my way to lunch. Your name and occupation, sir. Worthy, are you sure you want to do this? Your name and occupation! So, you want to play hardball, eh? But please, Mr. Gant. Fine. My name is Damon Gant, and I'm the acting chief of police. Now then, Chief Gant. The court requests to hear your testimony. Oh, righto! What's with the grim face? First, let's clear up this SL9 incident. Oh, you mean that time when Lana's sister murdered that prosecutor? Personally, I think it's been made pretty clear already. There are still some things unaccounted for. Oh, like what? Like the role you played in all of this? Son, either you are very brave or very foolish. You are aware, of course, that a police chief has all kinds of weapons at his disposal? Weapons? Sure, take my testimony, for example. I don't have to give it if I don't want to. What? Is that true? I'm afraid so. The chief of police has the right to refuse to testify. Déjame leerme el librito este de los huevos. Rule 1. No evidence shall be shown without the approval of the police department. Rule 2. Unregistered evidence presented must be relevant to the case on the trial. Vale. Of course, such an action carries with it certain risks. Don't worry, I'm not here to hinder your trial. Just remember, if this turns out to be a big waste of time, don't say I didn't warn you. Very well, the witness may now begin his testimony. Vamos allá. As I recall, Neil and I were questioning him that day. To make a long story short, we slipped up. That power outage didn't help either. When I went to my office, I found Lana there. Apparently she had already arranged the crime scene. As you can see, I had nothing to do with the forgery. Is that when Dark was arrested? Him? He was lying on the floor unconscious. When Emma sent Neil flying, it seems Dark bumped his head. I see, everything seems pretty clear-cut. If the police chief has the right to refuse to testify, then I'd better hit him hard and fast. Vamos a meterle una presión en todos sitios, tú. Vamos allá. As I recall, a ceremony was held at the police department that day. Yes, that's right. I guess you could say I'm workaholic. After winning his award, Neil was all fired up too. That's probably what spooked Dark and made him run away like that. Was the defendant Lana Skye also present in the room? I don't quite remember. At the very least, she wasn't there when Dark ran for it. We slipped up. The two of you ran immediately after him, right? That's right, but Darky made it to the elevator first, so Neil and I split up. He went upstairs and I went downstairs. I guess you could say he got lucky. Haha. What's this about, a power outrage? Oh, that. The elevator stopped all of a sudden and I got the shock of my life. Well, probably not as shocked as Neil was when that knife went into his heart though. That's not funny. at all. When I went to my office, I found Lana there. Could you tell us what you saw? Vamos a guardar por aquí, aunque le he dado sin querer. It was a shocking sight. Neil and that serial killer were lying in a heap on the floor, all tangled together. Dark was also lying collapsed on the floor. Yes, apparently he hit his head and was knocked out. Next to them were those two poor girls, Lana and Emma. Lana was cradling Emma in her arms. Looking back at it now, she must have already known what her sister had done. Apparently she had already arranged the crime scene. Arranged como? How can you know that? Because of the victim's body, it had already been moved. So that means you found the body near Lana's desk? That's right. I think you said earlier it was my suit of armor that really stabbed the prosecutor? Yes. Anyway, as you can see, I had nothing to do with the forgery. So you're saying that the forgery had already taken place by the time you arrived at your office? That's exactly what I'm saying. I can understand how Lana must have felt when moving a body and hiding evidence are inexcusable no matter what the circumstances. Is that how it really went down? Staring at the witness won't do you any good, Mr. Wright. You want to stare at anything? You're better off staring at the court record. Worthy, always the smooth talker. Which piece of evidence ties GANT to forgery? It can't be the whole truth. Somehow I've got to link GANT to the incident. Vamos a revisarlo todo esto. Nada. ¿Esto? Vale, es esto. Bueno, bueno. Vale, lo he pillado. Voy a recargar mis tries. Pero Shaylo, ¿por qué haces esto? Escúchame. Que... It's not as easy as it seems. Boom. If you really had nothing to do with the forgery, then how do you explain this? What's that? And what's that on it? A handprint? Chief GANT, your explanation, please. Oh? I don't know. You tell me, son. Huh? My dear writer, don't you know the second rule of evidence law? Oh, not this again, evidence law. Rule 2. Unregistered evidence presented must be relevant to the case on trial. Tell me, how is that WRIGHT relevant to this trial? It appears the defense was not prepared. I guess it's too early to use this piece of evidence. Please accept my profound apologies, Chief. Would you mind giving the defense another chance? Well, okay, I'll do it just this once, but only because you asked, Archie. Thank you, I assure you the defense is terribly sorry. Yeah, sorry I didn't nail you. ¿Es este otro? You claim you had nothing to do with the forgery. But I'm afraid that is a claim you cannot back up. Explain yourself. Several pieces of evidence were found in your office. Take this jar, for example. That's the blue badger you showed us earlier. A piece of this jar was discovered in your safe. Not only that, but the evidence list I presented earlier was actually found inside your desk. It was found where? You see, Chief GANT, these articles of evidence uncovered in your office are both concrete proof that you also played a part in the illegal investigation. Chief GANT, what's the meaning of this? Oh, here's a defense attorney who may even rival Worthy. So you admit to it then, that you were involved in the forgery? Who, me? Or do you mean you? Me? Why would I have anything to do with that? Well, you were the one who snuck into my office when you found this evidence. Prosecutors aren't the only ones capable of forging evidence, you know. Defense attorneys can do so too. Isn't that right, Raito? However, Detective Gumshoe was present during the investigation. Worthy, my boy. Not even detectives are exempt from the law. Rest assured, Dick will receive his due punishment. What? If Detective Gumshoe's salary drops any further, he'll end up paying to work. Yes, well, in light of the detective's presence, please give us your testimony regarding these pieces of evidence found in your office and their relation to the forgery that took place at the crime scene. My, kids these days no longer know how to put two and two together. Let's set, what was it now, a jar fragment and a list? For all I know, you could have planted them in my office. Anyway, you can't prove when those pieces of evidence were discovered. If they were found after Dark was convicted, then they are worthless. There's no reason I'd participate in a forgery. Rearranging the crime scene wouldn't help me out in any way. Yes, Your Honor. When investigating the crime scene, you should have been more careful to observe protocol. You do understand that I am the chief of police, right? There will be consequences. Oh. Indeed, I believe I will press charges, so you won't make the same mistakes again. My apologies, Chief, but would you mind waiting until tomorrow for that? Today is, well, you know. Alright, Aji. In return, though. I know. That place, right? Huh? What are these guys, telepathic? Evidence and forgery. Hay que guardar, eh. You have planted them in my office. I'd appreciate if you'd stop making these ridiculous allegations. Yes, you do have a point. You wouldn't have the guts to do something like that. What? I'll have you know, back in the day I once broke into a cattle ranch and tipped. Mr. Wright, what are you saying? Anyway, you can't prove you didn't carry in the evidence, can you? You have proof to the contrary, you're going to need it later. Later? What are you talking about? What else? I'm talking about when Raito's prints were found. Yes, if they are found inside my safe, they would prove his investigation was illegal. I've never faced anyone as slimy as this guy. You can't prove when those pieces of evidence were discovered. What do you mean by that? It's all purely hypothetical, of course, but suppose I did place those items in my safe. Such an act wouldn't necessarily constitute forgery. If concealing evidence found at the crime scene isn't forgery, I'm not through speaking yet, righto? It all depends on when the evidence was discovered. If they were found after Dark was convicted, then they are worthless. Are you saying this jar fragment wasn't discovered in the initial investigation? It would appear not. After all, it was listed in the evidence. It wasn't listed in the evidence list. For all we know, it could have suddenly materialized the day after Dark was sentenced. Oh, and wouldn't that be convenient, right? The chief is talking about that possibility, so long as you can't rule that out. Your remarks, however, clever they may be, will only succeed in wasting time. They'll tell me something I don't know. Come on, Raito, think about it. Es que aquí... No, solo me deja la parte de atrás. Claro, si aquí me dijera toda la list de evidence y mierdas que hay. There's no reason I participate in a forgery. How can you look me in the eye and say that? Because I'm innocent. Remember? Who was it that murdered Neil? I'm not sure I care for the word murder here, but in the end the person responsible for Mr. Marshall's unfortunate demise was Emma Skye. Well, now that you see? Rearranging the crime scene wouldn't help me out in any way. Really, Chief Ken? At the very least, there is one very large benefit you've reaped from all of this. Oh, I wasn't aware. What is this benefit? That would, of course, be the position you have, of Police. Oh, the resolution of the SL9 incident secured your promotion to Chief. That in itself is sufficient motive. Oh, 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 that's a good one. Huh? Do you really think I'm that incompetent? What do you mean? Even without that case, I was already in line to become the next chief. The resolution of SL9 merely sped up the inevitable a little. Is that true, Edgewolf? Yes, he was going to be made chief anyway. Ah! Be careful when pointing that finger, or you might wind up being the one pointed at. So that means there's only one possible motivation for you to commit forgery. If you didn't do it for yourself, then you did it for someone else. Huh? Don't be silly, Worthy. You know me better than that. There are only 3 people I look out for. Me, myself, and I. There, it's out in the open now. Archie, would you mind if I change my testimony a little? By all means, please do. I wouldn't be anyone's accomplice if there was nothing in it for me. Nothing in it for you? Sorry, but the only person I care about is yours truly. That girl, Zana's little sister, was it? If you think I felt sorry for her, you'd better think again. You're right. You don't feel sorry for anyone. Be taught on crime and taught on people. Tough. Yes, that's how I was raised. You seem to be lax enough on yourself, though. Oh, oh, oh! Oh, that's a good one, Worthy. Could there have been something in it for him? Given his self-image, would he point out a compliance? Yo creo que sí. True, you might not help out anyone for their sake, but if it would benefit you, you might decide to assist someone. Mr. Wright, it appears you're possibly determined to portray the chief as a nice man who likes to... Okay? No, that's not what I mean. Very well then. Who is this person you believe Chief Gunn may have helped forge evidence? Esta de aquí. Chief Prosecutor Lana Skye? The defendant? I believe it's quite obvious in light of the circumstances. Emma Skye fell victim to an unfortunate series of events. Who would want to help her more than her own sister Lana? As for the Chief Gant, he would also have a reason to help Lana if she asked him to. That reason, of course, is self-profit. Self-profit? What do you mean? After the SL9 incident was resolved, Skye was appointed Chief Prosecutor at the Prosecutor's office. The person who arranged this job change was you, Chief Gant. But how would he profit from all this? He would be able to use the Chief Prosecutor as his puppet. Essentially, he would acquire unchecked authority over all investigations. Do you mean to tell me that despite the Chief's formidable appearance, he plays with puppets? Oh, wait. You must mean puppet as in someone forced to do his bidding. Never mind. Juez, me cago en todo. Admit it, Chef. You assisted Lana Skye in forging evidence. Your motive to appoint her as the Chief Prosecutor so you could control her. Right, my boy. You have quite an imagination. Let me ask you something. What? Do you have any proof of this? That I controlled Lana? For example, is Lana testifying that I've done such a thing? Lana. She's keeping quiet to protect Emma. There's no way she'd testify against Gant. I'm afraid without any proof this all amounts to nothing more than mere conjecture. Unless that is also what happened in this incident. This incident? Which one would that be? Of course I'm talking about the murder of Detective Bruce Goodman. The Chief Prosecutor has been acting strange throughout this entire trial. Almost as if someone has been controlling her. Worthy, you better watch your tongue. I wouldn't want you to get hurt. Just what do you mean? What he means, Your Honor, is that Chief Gant is involved in the murder of Detective Goodman. Not only that, but the Chief is now making Lana take the rap to cover up his involvement. What? What? Wow. Order! I said order! Mr. Wright, you can't be serious, huh? This is an affront to the highest ranking officer in our law enforcement agency to accuse the chief of police of blackmail and murder. That's impossible. Pues es más que posible. Hay una cantidad de corrupción. Your Honor, I was merely reiterating what Mr. Edgeworth said in easier to understand language. It's too late, Mr. Wright. There's no turning back for us now. It looks like he's the one who's decided to go through with this. Can you prove this, Mr. Wright? That the chief of a high-ranking officer of the law is involved in this matter? Good question. Regardless of his rank or title, Chief Gant is just a man. The question is he a criminal? I believe the evidence will tell. I see. Alright then. Vamos a guardar. Let's see what Mr. Wright's got, and it better be good. Show us this evidence that ties Chief Gant to the murder of Detective Goodman. ¿Este de aquí puede ser? Well, Chief, so long as Wright here is tossing out things regardless of the relevance, mind if I toss something too, Archie? This you should do nicely. I'll chuck it right at you. You were quite the joker, weren't you? Oops, looks like I got it wrong. I know it's hard with all that's gone on during this trial, but try to think back to what happened in the evidence room 4 days ago. We did find something during yesterday's investigation, something that proves Gant entered that room. Ah. Gracias. A lo mejor este de aquí. Plop. Me lo han dicho bastante, ¿no? This is the ID card list. Yes, the one shows who entered the evidence room on the day of the crime. There was one ID on the list we couldn't determine the owner of yesterday. Many sevens. 7 sevens. Sorry, but there's no way you can prove that's my card number. It's your number. What? How do you know that? The safe in Chief Gant's office requires a code to open. A 7-digit code. 7 digits? You don't mean... I'm afraid so, Your Honor. The code was 7 sevens. The same as the remaining ID card number on that list. Chief Gant, you entered the evidence room on the day of the crime. Mira cómo se pone nervioso. Pum, pillada. Order, Chief Gant. What do you have to say? Nothing. The defense's search of my office was in violation of regulations, and I will demand Mr. Wright be punished to the maximum extent of the law. But right now, this court demands an explanation from you about the use of this ID card. Chief Gant, so you admit it? You entered the evidence room on the day of the crime? What about it? I'm chief of police, whether it's the evidence room or the bathroom. What's the difference? I can go anywhere I want. Tell me, when you entered the room, were you alone? I'd always go to the bathroom alone, as I do with the evidence room. Detective Goodman wouldn't have happened to be with you that day, would he? Oh, of course not. Why would he be? I hadn't seen him in days. You hadn't seen him in days, Chief Gant? I'm afraid you've just undone yourself. On that day, you had to have met with Detective Goodman. What do you mean? This trial's purpose is to determine Lana Sky's guilt. No, it isn't, Your Honor. This trial's purpose is to determine the truth. If Chief Gant met the victim on the day of the crime, then we need to determine one thing. What transpired during that meeting? Que lo mató. In that case, Mr. Wright, I'm going to have to ask you for evidence. Just prove the victim went to meet Chief Crime on the day of the crime. Ya empezamos. ¿Puede ser esto? The woman lost his ID card on the day of the crime. Esto es, puñetas. Or to be more accurate, Jake Marshall stole it. Detective Goodman filled out a lost item report. He would have had to give that report to the chief of police. Yet you are in possession of the report, which means you can be sure if he filed it. He filed it. How do I know, you ask? Because he needed to enter the evidence room that day. He needed to? Yes, to transfer the evidence out. Oh, Detective Goodman took the form to you, Chief Gant. Then, you accompanied the detective to the evidence room. I accompanied him? There is no other way the murderer and Detective Goodman could have entered the room. Bueno. Hold on, let me guess what you're going to say next. Your next line is... the chief of police murdered poor Goodman. Exactly. But wait! The chief didn't necessarily need to accompany him to the evidence room. He could have just lent him his ID card. Yes. Now that you mention it... Sorry, but that's not possible. According to the record, your card was only used once. Yet you showed us your ID card earlier. If you had really lent it to Detective Goodman, it would have been found on his body. Yeah. No, pero bueno. Chief Gant, you didn't. Y esa transformación que se ha vuelto Super Saiyan por un segundo. The murder was most likely a spur of the moment crime, for no one in their right mind would choose the police department as a place to commit murder. After the murder, you contacted Lana at the prosecutor's office. Why? To dispose of Detective Goodman's body, of course. You're forgetting, Mr. Wright. The victim's body was discovered in the prosecutor's office parking lot. How did he manage to move it there? I was at the police department the entire day, you know. And everyone's aware that Lana stayed at the prosecutor's office after the ceremony. Everyone except me, it seems. Still, you're the chief of police. You have an entire police force at your disposal. Oh, so you think I just ordered an officer to do it? Hey, you, take this here dead body over the prosecutor's office. I don't think so. Chief Gant, you left all the evidence we need to prove you moved the body to the prosecutor's office. And all this time I thought it was a useless clue, just taking up space. Ya volvemos otra vez a hacer estas cosas. Mr. Wright, show us the evidence. To move the victim's body, the Chief Gant used this. This is how he moved Detective Goodman's body. What's that? A screwdriver? But what does that have to do with this case? Mr. Edgeworth, think back to the day of the crime. What is this screwdriver doing here? It's here because... I was asked to go, by Chief Gant, no less. He told me he wanted to keep it here in the prosecutor's office. In any case, on the day of the stabbings, I brought this back here. After the ceremony ended that day, I didn't plan to return to the prosecutor's office, but you did, because Chief Gant asked you to. You mean The body was found in the trunk of Mr. Edgeworth's car. I think it's obvious what happened. The body was moved by that car. Qué liada. Detective Goodman's body was carried in the trunk of Mr. Edgeworth's car? Yes. Unless, of course, you have another explanation, Chief. Why else would you have asked Mr. Edgeworth to transport evidence from a closed case? There's only one plausible explanation. To transport the body to your accomplice, Mrs. Lana Skye. Pero bueno! Order, order, order! What's going on here? Is there no room for rebuttal to the defense's outrageous accusations? Think back to the photograph Miss Starr took at the prosecutor's office. This was not a photo of the body being stuffed in the trunk to be taken away. It was exactly the opposite. It is a photo of the body being taken from the trunk. Chief Gant, please say something. I believe your time's up. My time's up? Sorry, Writer, but I'm having lunch with the District Attorney General after this. We have to get going if we're to make it in time for the early bird special. But the cross-examination isn't finished yet. Remember what I told you earlier? A police chief has all kinds of weapons at his disposal. Weapons? Like the right to refuse to testify. I'm invoking that right now. What? That is not the right to be casually invoked. There are certain risks to be considered. So you're going to just run away after all this? Run away? Don't make me laugh, Worthy. I stabbed old Goodman. That's what you're saying, right? But if you had any conclusive evidence, you would have presented it by now. Well, You think I had Lana dispose of the body? If so, then show your proof and get it over with. I'll say it again, Mr. Wright. Damon Gang is the current chief of police. His court will not raise any accusations against him without any concrete proof. Hay que rematarle, eh? Well, Mr. Wright? Your Honor? Do you have any concrete proof? Proof that Chief Gant murdered Detective Goodman and made Mrs. Sky dispose of his body? Evidence. And just squirming his way out of this. I've got to keep the pressure on. Yes, Your Honor, I do have such evidence. Then please hurry up and present it. Just remember, I better prove James Goodman beyond a shadow of doubt. ¿Cuál es, tío? No. ¿Cómo? Y ahora se va. Did you like? Maybe we should have a word with her. Besides, what do you mean? There's one lady who knows the real truth behind this trial. We haven't yet had the honor of hearing her testimony. Es un matter of proof his testimony. A ver, ¿es esto correcto? ¿Tenía que decirle que no tengo ninguna evidence? A ver. Vale. Era decirle que no. Vale. I have the absence of conclusive evidence. The only method of proof is testimony. But Chief Gant has invoked his right to refuse to testify. There's still someone else. One more witness who can answer all the questions. Raised in this trial, someone right in this very room. Besides, who is this person? Why are you asking me, Your Honor? Have you forgotten the defense is the one calling witnesses today? Mr. Wright, does such a witness exist? She may not be willing to tell the truth, but we can't just stop now. Yes, Your Honor. Yes, esta. The defendant. Miss Lana Sky? She was in the underground parking lot at the 5:15 p.m. on February 21st. Her task to dispose of the victim's body. In accordance with certain someone's orders. Mr. Edgeworth? The proceeding has no objections, Your Honor. Very well. The court will now take its final recess for the day. In 15 minutes we will reconvene. Madre mía, que esto sigue. Hold on. Huh? Chief Gant, I thought you were going to eat. Listen good, Lana. He's talking to Lana. I don't think you need me to tell you this, but if you accept Mr. Wright's claims, there will be terrible consequences. That's right. Your sister will be found guilty for Neil Marshall's murder. It isn't good. Of course, you'd never support such outrageous claims anyway, right? Just something to think about. Alright then. I've got a lunch date to meet. Qué perraco, tío. Okay, if there are any further objections, this court is now in recess. Madre que me parió. February 25th, 2:04 p.m. Madre mía. Looks like we managed to stay in the game. Yeah, thanks to your help, Edgeworth. That chief, he's something else, pals? Detective Kamshu! I'm not a detective anymore. Oh yeah, sorry about that. Don't worry, I've already decided where to work now. At your office. My office? Sure. I'll take the place of that top-knocked girl you used to work with. Could he mean... Maya? Still, looks like we're all out of moves now. Chief Gant's done it again. How is it he always gets the upper hand? It's not fair he has the right to refuse to testify. Settle down, right? Remember what the judge said? But Chief, that is not a right to be casually invoked. There are certain risks to be considered. Risks? What did he mean by that? It's simple. If the chief refuses to testify, the opposite also holds true. You mean he forfeits his right to say anything too? Emma, are you okay? Yeah, when I came to, I was in the medical office. I've been listening to the trial from the gallery, so she heard everything that's been going on. Emma, I'm sorry for what I said before. No, don't be. It was the truth. You know, it's funny. I almost feel somehow relieved. Yeah, now I finally know what really happened. To think that all this time, my sister was being blackmailed by that terrible man, and she did it all just to protect me. Ever since her appointment as chief prosecutor, everyone who knew her said she changed. Perhaps it was easier that way for her. What do you mean? What do you think I mean? To follow Chief Gant's orders, she must have shut herself up deep inside, to force herself to do anything and everything the chief told her to do. That must be why she became so cold. It was all my fault. It's all because I murdered Mr. Marshall. Hey, don't go blaming yourself now. If you want to blame anyone, blame society, pal. Chief Gant may be able to fool everyone else with his forgery, but he can fool my memory. I remember now, I knocked Mr. Marshall into that armor. I see. Well, we'd better get back. It's time for the final act. Emma, why don't you wait here? No, I'm going with you. What? I want to be here when Lana tells the truth. Let's go, right? It's time to end this. ¡Oh! Otro episodio más. Hostia, tú. Pero ¿cómo de largo es este juego? Que yo... de verdad, episodio 5, día final, 3 episodios. Trae el letter, tú. Me cago en mi madre, tío. Flipante. En fin, voy a seguir una vez más grabando estos vídeos. Así que muchas gracias, espero que os haya gustado, que lo hayáis disfrutado. Y nos vemos en la próxima con más y mejor. Hasta la próxima. Adiós.